Put your phone on the desk right now, face down, and switched off. Just sitting there, not buzzing, not lighting up, just sitting in the room with you. A research team ran that exact test. People who kept their phones visible during cognitive tasks performed measurably worse than people whose phones were in another room. The device didn't have to do anything, didn't have to ring. The brain just knew it was there and quietly started working around it. That's not distraction. That's a structural reallocation of cognitive resources to a switched-off rectangle. Your brain isn't breaking down. It's being trained, and it's very good at following instructions. And that experiment is only the beginning of what researchers have found. Because the phone on the desk, that's the smallest piece of this. Something is happening to human cognition. Scientists are actively arguing about why, and the evidence, once you look at all of it together, is harder to sit with than most people realize. Let's go through it carefully, all of it, including the parts that complicate the story. Before we get to IQ scores or brain scans, there's a number that should stop you cold. In 2004, researchers began tracking how long knowledge workers stayed focused on a single screen task before switching. The average was about 2.5 minutes. That was reasonable, nothing remarkable. That was 2004. Researchers remeasured over the following 2 decades. By the early 2010s, the number had dropped to about 75 seconds. A few years later, 47 seconds. 2 minutes of sustained focus, gone in 20 years. Gloria Mark at UC Irvine has spent her career on this data. Her team used logging software and wearable sensors on knowledge workers, not surveys, actual measurement. The average worker now switches between apps and tasks over 1,200 times per day. Each time attention fractures, it takes roughly 23 minutes to fully re-engage with what you were doing. Most of us are never fully focused on anything. Mark doesn't call this a personal failing. She calls it a structural property of how digital work is organized. The environment was built to do this, and the environment is very good at its job. But the fragmentation isn't just a habit. It goes deeper than that. IQ scores in verbal and mathematical reasoning have dropped across multiple Western countries since the mid-1990s. The list includes Norway, Finland, Denmark, the UK, and Germany. Researchers tracking conscription data, mandatory national testing of hundreds of thousands of young men, saw scores that had risen for decades start bending the other way. A 2018 analysis by Bratsberg and Rogeberg, published in the journal PNAS, examined over 730,000 Norwegian conscripts tested between 1970 and 2009. The scores went up for cohorts born through the early 1970s, then started falling for cohorts born after that. Logical reasoning, verbal ability, and arithmetic all declining together. The critical detail in that study: they compared brothers, siblings raised in the same household, same parents, same genetics, where the younger sibling consistently scored lower than the older one. That rules out genetics. It rules out family background. Whatever is driving the decline is environmental, and it's happening within a generation. The researchers concluded that environmental differences within families must be driving generational IQ gains and losses. That is not a comfortable finding. A separate American study tracked cognitive ability scores across 2006 to 2018, using a sample wide enough to represent the wider population. 3 of 4 domains declined: verbal reasoning, matrix reasoning, mathematical reasoning. Composite scores lower for more recent cohorts. Statistically robust after adjusting for age, education, and gender. The declines are modest, a few IQ points per decade, not intellectual collapse. But the direction is consistent across countries, test types, and methods, and the timing lines up with the mass arrival of smartphones and social media. Scientists are split on exactly why IQ scores are falling in these countries. They are not split on whether it is happening. But before we go further, there's a piece of this story that gets left out. And it matters. Not all of this is clean. The picture is more complicated than the headlines suggest, and you deserve the full version. IQ tests have real limitations, ceiling effects, If a high ability group clusters near the top of the test's difficulty range, small shifts can look larger than they are. Sampling shifts. As conscription policies changed across Europe, the population being tested changed too, with more exemptions, different eligibility rules, different immigration patterns. Renorming artifacts. Tests get redesigned over time, and some apparent declines may partly reflect those design changes rather than genuine cognitive change. Bratsberg and Roseberg's sibling analysis controls for some of this, but it cannot isolate every variable. There are other researchers who remain genuinely skeptical of the IQ narrative. Andrew Przybyłski at the Oxford Internet Institute has spent years scrutinizing screen time studies and repeatedly found that effect sizes are small, often explaining less than 1% of variance in cognitive outcomes. His position: the moral panic around smartphones and cognition outruns what the evidence can actually support. He is not wrong to push back. That scrutiny makes the remaining evidence stronger, not weaker. The goldfish story is worth mentioning. You may have heard that human attention spans drop below a goldfish's 8 seconds. That came from a 2015 Microsoft marketing report. It was not a scientific study. It does not hold up. The 47-second figure from Gloria Mark is real research. The goldfish is not. One more piece. Spatial reasoning is going up. Studies consistently show that people, particularly gamers, are performing better on mental rotation, 3D spatial tasks, and visuospatial navigation than previous generations. Randomized trials assigning non-gamers to 3D platformers for 10 to 20 hours found measurable improvements in spatial ability. Not all cognitive capacities are in decline. What the research actually suggests is this: cognition isn't being destroyed, it's being reallocated. The question is whether the capacities we're losing are the ones that matter for the life we want to live. That framing comes from the research itself, and it's more useful than panic or denial. The brain is adapting. The question worth sitting with is, adapting toward what? Because the attention data, even with all those caveats, is hard to dismiss. And the mechanism behind it is harder still. Here is what is actually happening inside the brain. Your dopamine system evolved for a world of scarcity. Intermittent, unpredictable rewards. Food you had to hunt. Social connection that required real effort. The brain's reward circuit releases dopamine in anticipation of something good, especially when the timing is unpredictable. That unpredictability is the key. Variable rewards produce stronger habituation than reliable ones. Every slot machine designer in history has known this. Now, every app designer does too. Likes arrive unpredictably. Comments come at random. The notification sound becomes a conditioned cue. You feel the pull before you've even looked at the screen. That's the reward prediction error system doing exactly what it was built to do, just in an environment it was never built for. Anna Lemke, psychiatrist at Stanford, has studied this for years. Her conclusion: we are all vulnerable to compulsive overconsumption, not because we are weak-willed, but because our world has become an addiction-ogenic environment. The deeper problem is what happens with repeated exposure. The brain compensates for high stimulation. Dopamine receptors downregulate. You need more stimulation to get the same response. The hedonic set point shifts. Ordinary activities, a conversation, a meal, sitting quietly, register as less satisfying because the baseline has moved. Lemke calls this the opponent process. The brain counters pleasure with pain, and chronic overstimulation leaves a residue of low-level dissatisfaction when the stimulus is gone. This is not metaphor. There are structural changes in the reward circuitry of people with compulsive screen use. The brain is physically changed, and the same system that drives attention fragmentation is the one keeping you awake at night, which is where the damage compounds. Most people know screens before bed affect sleep. Not many people know what sleep is actually doing and what stops happening when it breaks. During the night, your brain cycles through stages. The early hours are dominated by slow wave sleep, deep oscillations during which the hippocampus replays the day's experiences and transfers them into long-term storage. Facts, episodes, vocabulary, all consolidated here. Later in the night, REM sleep takes over, the stage for emotional integration, creativity, and connecting new ideas to existing knowledge. Matthew Walker's research describes REM as overnight therapy. It processes what happened and integrates it into long-term memory. When you scroll at midnight, two things happen. Blue light suppresses melatonin and delays your internal clock, pushing you to sleep later than your body wants. And the content, social comparison, novelty, mild stress, activates your sympathetic nervous system. It raises arousal. The brain that should be winding down is now alert and engaged. Even if you sleep for 7 hours after that, the architecture is compromised. The early slow-wave windows shrink. The REM later in the night is shortened or fragmented. The consolidation that was supposed to happen doesn't. Not completely. Research published in JAMA Network Open Tracking, large cohorts over time, found that both short sleep and fragmented sleep were associated with faster cognitive decline across years. Experimental studies show acute sleep deprivation impairs memory encoding and hippocampal function specifically. Chronic restriction, even modest restriction night after night, accumulates damage that feels invisible because it happens slowly. You doom scroll at midnight and forget what you read that morning. Those two things are connected. The link is mechanistic, not metaphorical. But there's one more loss that most people haven't thought about. And this one is the quietest. The brain did not evolve to read. Reading is about 5,000 years old, far too recent for evolution. Instead, the brain repurposes existing circuits. Regions for object recognition, language, attention, and executive function are rewired into a network that didn't exist before literacy. Marianne Wolf, cognitive neuroscientist at UCLA, has spent her career studying what this network does and what happens when it changes. Deep reading, the kind where you follow a sustained argument, build a mental model, sit inside a character's perspective, activates a rich distributed circuit that includes regions responsible for inference, analogy, and moral reasoning. It builds those capacities. It is a cognitive workout for capacities that are hard to exercise any other way. Wolf's concern is this: digital environments reward skimming, scanning, and rapid context switching. They train a different reading circuit, faster, shallower, optimized for extraction. If that becomes the dominant mode, the deeper circuit atrophies from disuse. The experimental evidence backs this up. A meta-analysis by Delgado and colleagues reviewing dozens of paper versus screen reading experiments found a small but reliable disadvantage for digital reading, especially for inferential understanding and idea integration. The more striking finding: readers consistently overestimated their own comprehension when reading on screens. They thought they understood more than they did. A later meta-analysis confirmed the effect sizes were larger in studies conducted after 2000 than in earlier studies. As if the comprehension gap widens the more habituated to digital reading people become. This is the part nobody told you. The circuit is changing. You probably haven't noticed because you're still reading words. But whether those words are building anything structural, that's a different question. Nicholas Carr put it plainly: what the net seems to be doing is chipping away my capacity for concentration and contemplation. He wrote that in 2010. The data since then has not been kind to optimists. The population-level version of this is showing up in teenagers, and it's being caught on a scale that's hard to explain away. Around 2012, something changed in the data on adolescent mental health and cognitive development. It was gradual at first, then not. Jonathan Haidt's research, summarized in The Anxious Generation, points to smartphone penetration crossing a threshold, the moment when teenagers en masse move their social lives online. What changed alongside that? time in unsupervised, unstructured, face-to-face exploration declined. With it went the kind of boredom, friction, and real-world problem-solving that builds attentional control and working memory over time. Heavy phone use in adolescence doesn't just fill time. The research suggests it impairs the development of executive function, the capacities needed to regulate attention and hold information in mind. The brain at 15 is still actively building its prefrontal infrastructure. What that period is spent doing matters more than it would at 40. There is a natural experiment buried in pandemic schooling data. Children whose education was disrupted showed executive function losses equivalent to roughly 11 to 12 months of normal development. When schools reopened, recovery came, but only at 65 to 74% of the pre-disruption rate. The brain didn't pause. It adapted instead, and some of that adaptation stuck, because that's what brains do. Haidt's proposed interventions are structural: delayed smartphone ownership, phone-free schools as a collective action problem. He is not the only researcher arguing for this. The pushback from Przybylski that effect sizes are small and causality is hard to establish is real. Both can be true. Small effects at population scale, compounding over the years of adolescence, add up to something that matters. But none of this is irreversible. That's the part that matters most. The same property that makes the brain vulnerable to this is the thing that makes it recoverable. Neuroplasticity goes both ways. Wolf's intervention studies found that structured deep reading programs, 20 to 30 minutes of distraction-free, reflective reading of demanding texts, sustained over several weeks, improved comprehension scores, and showed increased connectivity in reading networks on neuroimaging. The circuit, once exercised, rebuilds. It is not gone. It is dormant. Sleep hygiene restores consolidation. When artificial light and late scrolling are removed, melatonin normalizes, sleep architecture recovers, and hippocampal memory encoding improves. The research on this is consistent. The recovery isn't complete overnight, but it is measurable. Lemke's clinical data on dopamine abstinence shows that after a period of reduced stimulation, even a few weeks, receptor sensitivity recovers. Ordinary pleasures become pleasurable again. The hedonic baseline lifts, the brain recalibrates. Exercise has a direct effect on hippocampal neurogenesis and is one of the few non-pharmaceutical interventions with reliable evidence for protecting cognitive function. This is the brain's own recovery mechanism, not life hacking. The biology is not fixed. The environment changed the brain. Changing the environment changes it back, not completely, not immediately, but measurably. Which brings us to the question that sits underneath all of this. For almost all of human history, the brain was trained by scarcity. Sustained effort was required for almost anything worth having. To learn, you had to sit with difficulty. To remember, you had to retrieve, not scroll back. To solve a problem, you had to hold complexity in your head long enough to turn it over. The brain that evolved in that environment is the same brain sitting behind your eyes right now. Your ancestors didn't have better brains than you. They had worse environments for distraction and better environments for depth. That's the whole story. What's different now is that the environment has been optimized by people who understood reward circuits better than most neuroscientists did, and who had every financial incentive to maximize the number of times per day your attention could be captured and sold. The result is an environment that your ancient reward system cannot easily resist because it was never built to resist engineered abundance. It was built for a world that had almost none. This is not a counsel of despair. The brain didn't change first, the environment did, and environments can be redesigned by policy, by platform, and by choice. The same brain that learned to skim can learn to read again. The same reward system that got trained toward the ping can be retrained toward depth. But only if you decide the old capacities are worth keeping. That decision, unlike most of what we've been talking about, belongs entirely to you.